When a forgotten small-town doctor walks into America's most expensive hospital and tells their best cardiac surgeon, "You're killing her," nobody believes him, until 9 minutes later, he does the impossible and saves the dying billionaire CEO that an entire team of specialists couldn't. But here's what they don't know. Years ago, this same hospital destroyed his life, covered up his wife's death, and forced him to disappear. Now he's back, and the truth he's been hiding will shake their world apart. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The vinyl chair in Ethan Cole's cramped clinic squeaked under old Mrs. Patterson's weight as she apologized again for not having insurance. Third time this month. Ethan waved her off without looking up from the prescription pad, his handwriting messier than it used to be back when it mattered, back when people cared about things like that. $20, he said. That's what I'm charging you. Dr. Cole, the medication alone costs $20. He handed her the script. And I want you back here in 2 weeks. Not 3. Not when it gets worse. 2 weeks, Margaret. She took the paper with shaking hands, eyes wet. Ethan turned away before she could start thanking him. He hated that part. Always had. The clinic smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. 2 exam rooms, a waiting area with chairs that didn't match, and a front desk where nobody actually sat because Ethan couldn't afford a receptionist. The building itself sagged between a hardware store and a place that sold antique furniture nobody wanted. Black Ridge, Montana wasn't the kind of town where people moved to start over. It was where you ended up when you'd already tried everything else. Ethan walked Mrs. Patterson to the door, watched her climb into a pickup truck that looked older than his, then locked up 20 minutes early because there weren't any other appointments. There were never that many appointments. The February cold hit him like a fist when he stepped outside. Sharp, mean cold that made his jaw ache. He pulled his coat tighter and headed down Main Street, past the hardware store, past Jensen's diner where they knew his order by heart, past the post office where Sharon always asked about Lily. Lily. His daughter would be getting out of school in 15 minutes, and if he was late again, she'd be standing alone by the chain-link fence with that expression she wore when she tried not to look worried. 7 years old and already learning to hide her feelings. He walked faster. The elementary school sat at the edge of town, a squat brick building with windows that rattled in the wind. Ethan arrived with 3 minutes to spare, took his usual spot by the fence, and waited. Other parents clustered in small groups, talking about weather and town council meetings, and whose kid made the honor roll. They nodded at Ethan when they saw him. Always polite, never quite friendly. The bell rang. Kids poured out the double doors in a chaos of backpacks and shouting. Lily appeared near the back of the crowd, smaller than most of the other second graders, her dark hair pulled into a ponytail that had gone crooked sometime during the day. She spotted Ethan and smiled, and something in his chest loosened a little. "How was school?" he asked when she reached him. "Fine." "Just fine?" "We had math. I don't like long division." "Nobody likes long division. It's basically torture they invented for children." She giggled, took his hand. They walked home through streets lined with houses that needed new paint, past yards where pickup trucks sat on blocks, under a sky that looked like old dishwater. Lily talked about her friend Emma and the class hamster, and how her teacher said they might do a science project about volcanoes. Ethan listened, made the right sounds at the right times, tried not to think about the stack of past due bills on his kitchen counter. Their house was small, one story, with siding that had once been white. The porch steps creaked. The front door stuck in the frame and you had to shoulder it open. Inside smelled like the chicken he'd put in the slow cooker that morning, which meant dinner was already handled and he wouldn't have to think about cooking later when he was too tired to stand. "Homework first," Ethan said, hanging up their coats. Lily groaned but dropped her backpack on the kitchen table and pulled out a worksheet. Ethan started making coffee, moved around the kitchen on autopilot while she worked through multiplication problems. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the scratch of Lily's pencil on paper. He'd bought this place 6 years ago with what little money he'd had left after leaving New York. The real estate agent had called it cozy, which was code for small and full of potential, which meant it was falling apart. But it had a yard where Lily could play and a second bedroom and a kitchen table where they could eat dinner together, and that was enough. That had to be enough. "Dad?" Lily's voice pulled him back. Is 14 times 6 84? Yes. Are you sure? Very sure. She wrote down the answer, moved to the next problem. Ethan poured coffee into a mug that said, "World's Best Dad," because Lily had given it to him last Christmas, sat down across from her, and tried not to notice how much she looked like Sarah. Same dark eyes. Same way of concentrating so hard her forehead wrinkled. Same stubborn set to her jaw when something didn't make sense. Sarah had been gone for 5 years. Lily barely remembered her anymore, which was both a blessing and something that hurt so much Ethan sometimes had trouble breathing. "Done," Lily announced, pushing the worksheet toward him. Ethan checked her work, found 2 mistakes, helped her fix them. Then she disappeared into her room to play while he started on dinner prep, cutting vegetables with a knife that needed sharpening, listening to her makeup stories for her stuffed animals in the other room. The afternoon light coming through the kitchen window turned orange, then pink, then gray. He was draining pasta when the television in the living room flickered to life. Lily must have turned it on. She liked the nature documentaries, the ones about penguins and deep-sea creatures. Ethan didn't mind, kept her entertained while he finished cooking. But then the sound changed, adult voices. Urgent. "Dad!" Lily called. "Something's happening." Ethan dried his hands and walked into the living room. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, still holding the remote, staring at the TV. The screen showed the inside of what looked like a corporate press conference. Expensive suits, flash photography, a woman at a podium, mid-sentence, when her words suddenly slurred. I need to... The woman's face went pale. Her hand gripped the podium, then her knees buckled. The screen erupted into chaos. People shouting, cameras swinging, someone yelling for a doctor. Ethan's coffee mug froze halfway to his mouth. The woman on the screen was Victoria Sterling. He knew that face. Everyone in America knew that face. 30 years old, CEO of Sterling Biotech, worth something like $8 billion. She'd been on the cover of Forbes 3 times. Time magazine had called her the future of American medicine. 6 months ago, she'd testified before Congress about drug pricing and made 2 senators look like idiots on live television. And now she was on the floor of some conference room in Manhattan, not moving, while EMTs rushed in with equipment and the news anchors started speculating about strokes and heart attacks and whether America was about to lose one of its brightest minds. Ethan set down his mug carefully. His hands weren't shaking. Not yet. "Is she going to be okay?" Lily asked quietly. "I don't know, sweetheart." The news cut to a reporter standing outside Manhattan Crown Medical Center, breath visible in the cold New York air. "We're just receiving word that Victoria Sterling has been admitted to the cardiac intensive care unit. Sources inside the hospital say her condition is critical. The medical team, led by renowned cardiologist Dr. Marcus Hale, is working to stabilize her, but as of this moment, details remain scarce." Ethan walked into the kitchen and turned off the stove. The pasta could wait. Manhattan Crown Medical Center. Of course it was Manhattan Crown. Where else would they take someone like Victoria Sterling? The best cardiac unit in the country. The most expensive hospital in America. The place where they promised miracles and sometimes actually delivered them. The place where Sarah had died. Ethan leaned against the counter, pressed his palms flat against the cool laminate surface, and tried to slow his breathing. That hospital was 2,000 miles away. That part of his life was over. He'd left it behind, burned those bridges, changed his phone number twice to make sure nobody from that world could ever find him again. His phone rang. Ethan looked at it sitting on the counter. Unknown number, New York area code. He didn't answer. It rang again 30 seconds later. Same number. "Dad?" Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed bear. "Your phone!" "I know." He declined the call. The phone immediately rang again. Ethan stared at it. 5 years he'd been in Montana. 5 years of peace, of quiet, of pretending the past didn't exist. And now this. He answered. "Dr. Cole?" A woman's voice, professional but strained. "This is Jennifer Reeves. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Manhattan Crown Medical Center. I apologize for calling like this, but we have a situation. I don't work at your hospital anymore." "I'm aware. But Dr. Cole, we need you. Victoria Sterling's cardiac function is deteriorating despite our interventions. Dr. Hale requested we contact you specifically. He said if anyone could, Marcus Hale can go to hell." Silence on the other end. Then, "Dr. Cole, a woman is dying." Marcus should be able to handle it. He's the great Dr. Marcus Hale, isn't he? Department head, published in every major journal, speaks at conferences around the world. I'm sure he'll figure it out. Her implanted cardiac device is showing irregular readings. The team suspects a rejection reaction, but the presentation doesn't match any standard protocols. They've tried. Not my problem. "Dr. Cole, please." Ethan hung up. His hand was shaking now. He shoved the phone in his pocket and turned back to the stove, relit the burner under the pasta water, focused on the small blue flames, because if he didn't focus on something normal and ordinary and not connected to that hospital, or that city, or any of the people he'd left behind, he was going to put his fist through the wall. "Was that about the lady on TV?" Lily asked. "Yeah. Are they asking you to help her?" "They asked. I said no." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "Why?" "Because I don't do that anymore." "But you're a doctor." "I'm a small-town doctor now. I take care of people here." "That's enough." Lily didn't say anything else, just stood there holding her bear and watching him with those dark eyes that saw too much. After a minute, she went back to her room. Ethan finished making dinner. They ate at the kitchen table, the TV still on in the other room, showing continuous coverage of Victoria Sterling's collapse. Updates every few minutes. Condition critical. Medical team working around the clock. Nation holding its breath. He washed dishes, helped Lily with her bedtime routine, read her 2 chapters from the book they were working through, some fantasy thing about a girl who discovers she's a princess. Lily fell asleep before he finished the 2nd chapter, curled up under blankets printed with stars. Ethan turned off her light and went to his own room, sat on the edge of his bed in the dark. The house made its usual settling noises around him. Wind rattled the windows. The heating system kicked on with a groan. His phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number. Dr. Cole, this is Marcus Hale. I know we didn't part on good terms. I know you have every reason to hate me, but that woman is dying and I cannot save her. Whatever happened between us, whatever you think of me, she doesn't deserve to die because of our history. Please." Ethan deleted the message without responding. Another text appeared immediately. "Her cardiac output is down to 40%. We've tried every intervention. She's 30 years old, Ethan. She has family, people who love her. I'm begging you." Ethan turned off his phone. He didn't sleep that night, just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house, thinking about Sarah and Manhattan Crown and all the things he'd tried so hard to forget. Around 3 in the morning, he got up, walked into the kitchen, made coffee he didn't drink, and stood at the window watching snow fall in the yellow cone of the streetlight. Victoria Sterling was dying in a hospital 2,000 miles away, a hospital that had killed his wife, a hospital that had covered up their mistakes, a hospital that had destroyed his career when he'd tried to expose the truth. Let them figure it out themselves. Let Marcus Hale suffer for once. Let that whole corrupt system face something it couldn't fix with money and lawyers and carefully worded press releases. Ethan went back to bed, still didn't sleep. The next morning, Lily came into his room at 7, already dressed for school, and climbed onto the bed next to him. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "A little." "You're lying." "Maybe." She was quiet for a while. Then, "Mom would want you to help her." Ethan closed his eyes. "Don't." "She would, though. Mom helped everybody. You told me that. You said she couldn't walk past someone who needed help without stopping. Lily. And you always said I should try to be like her. That's not fair. I know." Lily hugged her bear tighter. "But it's true." Ethan sat up, looked at his daughter sitting there in her school clothes with her crooked ponytail and her stuffed bear and her mother's eyes, and felt something crack in his chest. "If I do this," he said slowly, "we'd have to go to New York. Okay? It might be dangerous for both of us. Okay? And after it's over, there's a good chance I'll never be able to practice medicine again anywhere." Lily thought about that. "Would you still be able to take care of people here in Blackridge?" "Probably not." "Then we'll figure something else out." She said it with such simple confidence, like the future was just another math problem they could solve together. Ethan pulled her into a hug. She smelled like kid shampoo and sleep. 7 years old and already braver than he'd ever been. "Okay," he whispered into her hair. "Okay." 2 hours later, Ethan had thrown clothes into a duffel bag, arranged for Mrs. Patterson to check on the house, and strapped Lily into the passenger seat of his 14-year-old pickup truck. The clinic was locked. A sign on the door said, "Closed for emergency, back soon." The truck's heater worked intermittently. The radio only picked up static outside of town. They had a thermos of coffee, a bag of gas station sandwiches, and 2,200 miles of highway between Montana and Manhattan. Ethan pulled out of Blackridge as the sun came up over the mountains, turning the snow pink and gold. Lily waved at the town as it disappeared in the rear-view mirror. Neither of them said anything about whether they'd be coming back. The drive took 40 hours with stops for gas and food and restless sleep in truck stop parking lots. Lily mostly slept or read her books or asked questions about New York that Ethan answered in brief, careful sentences. He didn't tell her about the last time he'd been in that city, about finding Sarah in the recovery room with her lips already turning blue, about the doctor who'd looked him in the eye and lied about what had gone wrong, about the months he'd spent investigating, collecting evidence, building a case that should have been ironclad, only to watch the hospital's legal team tear it apart like tissue paper. He didn't tell her any of that. They reached Manhattan on the evening of the second day. The city rose up around them like something from another planet, glass towers and illuminated advertisements and crowds of people moving through concrete canyons. Ethan had forgotten how overwhelming it was. The noise, the lights, the sheer density of human beings all pressed together. Manhattan Crown Medical Center took up an entire city block in the financial district. 15 stories of steel and glass, the kind of building designed to project competence and wealth. Ethan parked in a garage 3 blocks away because the hospital's lot was full, then walked with Lily through streets where steam rose from grates and people in expensive coats hurried past without making eye contact. The hospital lobby was all marble and recessed lighting. A water feature burbled against one wall. Everything smelled antiseptic and expensive. Ethan approached the main desk holding Lily's hand, very aware of how he looked. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, winter jacket with a torn pocket. The receptionist glanced up from her computer screen. "Can I help you?" "I'm Dr. Ethan Cole. I was contacted about Victoria Sterling." The woman's expression shifted from polite disinterest to something harder to read. She picked up a phone, spoke quietly into it, then looked back at Ethan. "Someone will be right down." They waited in chairs near the water feature. Lily clutched her stuffed bear and stared around at the lobby with wide eyes. 3 minutes passed, then 5. Ethan was starting to wonder if they'd forgotten when the elevator doors opened and a woman in a dark blazer stepped out. "Dr. Cole?" She walked toward them with quick, efficient steps. "I'm Jennifer Reeves. We spoke on the phone. Thank you for coming." Ethan stood. "How is she?" "Not good. Dr. Hale is with her now, but..." Jennifer's eyes flicked to Lily. "Is this your daughter?" "Yes. Her name is Lily." "Dr. Cole, I'm not sure if bringing a child to..." "She comes with me or I leave. Those are the terms." Jennifer hesitated, then nodded. "6th floor, cardiac ICU. I'll take you up." They rode the elevator in silence. Jennifer kept glancing at Ethan like she was trying to reconcile the man in front of her with whatever she'd heard about him. When the doors opened, they stepped into a hallway that smelled like disinfectant and fear. The cardiac ICU was a maze of glass-walled rooms surrounding a central nurse's station. Monitors beeped. Ventilators hissed. Somewhere a phone rang and rang and rang. Jennifer led them past rooms where patients lay connected to machines, past nurses who looked up with exhausted eyes, to a larger room at the end of the hall where several people in white coats stood, clustered around a bed. "Wait here," Jennifer said, then went to tap one of the doctors on the shoulder. The man turned. Ethan recognized him immediately. Dr. Marcus Hale had aged in 5 years. More gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth, but still the same posture, the same air of absolute confidence even when he was clearly out of his depth. Marcus saw Ethan and went very still. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus said something to the other doctors and walked over. "Ethan? Marcus? You came. Don't read anything into it." Marcus glanced at Lily. "This is my daughter. She stays with me." "Of course." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Look, I know we have history. I know you blame me for... I don't want to talk about history. What's her status? Marcus seemed to deflate slightly. Cardiac output at 38% and dropping. We've attempted 3 different medication protocols: electrical cardioversion, emergency catheterization. Nothing's working. The device, it's a Sterling Meyer XR9, implanted 18 months ago after she developed an arrhythmia. Recent imaging shows inflammatory markers around the implant site, but the presentation doesn't match typical rejection. Have you considered removing it? Too risky in her current state. She'd code before we got it out. Ethan looked past Marcus to the room where Victoria Sterling lay connected to more machines than seemed possible. I need to see her chart. Of course, but Ethan... Marcus lowered his voice. Whatever you can do it fast. She doesn't have long. Ethan walked into the room. The other doctors, 4 of them, all in expensive-looking scrubs, stepped back to give him space. They watched him the way you'd watch a stranger at a funeral, curious but wary. Victoria Sterling looked small in the hospital bed, pale, unconscious. Tubes and wires everywhere. The cardiac monitor above her bed showed a rhythm that made Ethan's stomach tighten. Not good. Not good at all. He picked up the chart from the end of the bed and started reading. Behind him, Lily settled into a chair near the door with her bear. Nobody said anything, just the beeping of monitors and the hiss of the ventilator and the quiet sound of pages turning. Ethan read for 7 minutes, then he looked up. "You're killing her," he said quietly. The room went dead silent. One of the younger doctors, a woman with red hair pulled back in a ponytail, spoke first. "Excuse me? You're killing her," Ethan repeated. The inflammatory response isn't rejection. It's an interaction between the device coding and her immunosuppressants. You're treating the symptoms and making the underlying cause worse. Marcus stepped forward. "That's impossible. We've run every test." "Did you check for cross-reactive polymer syndrome? That's extremely rare." "It's also exactly what this is." Ethan dropped the chart back on the bed. The XR9's coding breaks down under certain immunological conditions, releases particulates that trigger a cascade response. Every medication you've given her has accelerated the breakdown. You've been poisoning her for the last 48 hours. The red-haired doctor looked at Marcus. "Is that possible?" "It's theoretically possible, but the incidence rate is less than 0.05%, Ethan finished. "I know. I helped design the original study." That got their attention. All 4 doctors stared at him now with different expressions. Surprise, skepticism, recognition. Marcus cleared his throat. Ethan was one of the leading cardiac surgeons in the country before he left medicine. "I didn't leave. I was forced out." Ethan looked directly at Marcus. "Because I wouldn't keep quiet about mistakes." The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Marcus's jaw tightened. The other doctors glanced at each other. Then the cardiac monitor started screaming. Everyone turned. Victoria's heart rhythm on the screen went from bad to catastrophic, ventricular tachycardia spiraling into fibrillation. "She's coding!" the red-haired doctor shouted. Nurses burst into the room. Someone yelled for the crash cart. Marcus pushed past Ethan toward the bed, started barking orders. "Charge to 200! We need—" "Stop!" Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. "What?" "Stop! You shock her now, you'll blow out what's left of her cardiac tissue. We have to—" "Marcus!" Ethan grabbed his arm. "Trust me, just once." They stared at each other. Around them the alarm screamed and nurses waited, and Victoria Sterling died a little bit more with every passing second. "Fine," Marcus finally said. "Do it." Ethan moved to the bed. Lily watched from her chair by the door, still holding her bear, dark eyes taking in everything. The other doctors backed away to give Ethan space. He could feel them judging, doubting, waiting for him to fail. He'd forgotten how that felt. The pressure. The weight of a life in your hands. The knowledge that one wrong move, one missed detail, and someone's daughter or wife or mother stops existing. He'd forgotten. But his hands remembered. Ethan worked quickly, adjusting medication dosages, changing her position, manipulating the device settings in a sequence he'd only read about in research papers because nobody actually performed this procedure. It was too dangerous, too experimental, the failure rate too high. "You're going to kill her," someone whispered behind him. "She's already dying," Ethan said without looking up. "This is the only chance." 3 minutes passed. 4. The monitor continued screaming. Victoria's lips were turning blue. Ethan made one final adjustment to the device settings, then stepped back. "Now we wait." "Wait?" The red-haired doctor sounded horrified. "We need to..." "Wait." 30 seconds. A minute. Everyone in the room stood frozen, watching the monitor, watching Victoria's chest barely rise and fall, watching the numbers that said death was coming and there was nothing they could do about it. Then the rhythm changed. Just slightly. A flutter. A catch. Another 30 seconds. The rhythm stabilized. Normal sinus, strong and steady. The alarm stopped. Someone let out a breath. Then another. The red-haired doctor looked at the monitor, then at Ethan, then back at the monitor like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Marcus stared at Victoria's now normal heart rhythm. "How did you... The device has a secondary calibration protocol, bypasses the main interaction pathway. It's in the technical documentation, but nobody reads technical documentation." Ethan's hands were shaking now. He shoved them in his pockets. "She'll need the device removed within 48 hours once she's stable enough for surgery. And someone should review every medication order from the last 3 days because you've probably done some kidney damage." Yes, of course." Marcus still looked stunned. Ethan walked to where Lily sat. "Come on, sweetheart, let's go." "Where are you going?" Jennifer Reeves had appeared in the doorway. "Back to Montana." "Dr. Cole, you just saved Victoria Sterling's life. The board will want to meet you, and..." "I don't care what the board wants." Ethan picked up his daughter. She wrapped her arms around his neck. "I came because someone asked for help. I helped. Now we're leaving." He walked past Jennifer, past the nurses, past the other doctors who stepped aside to let him through. Behind him he heard Marcus call his name, but he didn't stop. Just carried Lily down the hallway, into the elevator, through the lobby with its marble floors and expensive water feature. They made it 3 blocks before Ethan had to stop and sit on a bench, because his hands wouldn't stop shaking and his chest felt too tight and everything he'd been holding back for the last 40 hours hit him all at once. Lily climbed down from his arms and sat next to him. "You okay, Dad?" "Yeah, just give me a minute." They sat there while the city moved around them, people walking dogs, taxis honking, someone selling hot dogs from a cart across the street, normal life continuing like nothing had happened. After a while, Lily said, "That was pretty cool. What you did." "Yeah?" "Yeah, you saved her." "I guess I did." "Does that feel good?" Ethan thought about it. "I don't know yet." They sat a while longer. Then Ethan stood, took Lily's hand, and started walking toward where they'd parked the truck. They'd made it 5 more blocks when a black SUV pulled up beside them, and the window rolled down. Jennifer Reeves looked out at them. "Get in the car, Dr. Cole." "We're leaving." "Victoria Sterling is awake. She's asking for you." "Tell her I'm glad she's okay, but..." "She knows who you are." Jennifer's expression was serious. "She knows what happened to your wife. She knows what this hospital did to you. And she wants to talk to you anyway. Please." Ethan looked down at Lily. She shrugged, which meant it was his choice. He was so tired. Tired of running. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending the past didn't matter. "Okay," he said. "Okay." They got in the SUV. The SUV smelled like leather and air freshener trying too hard to smell like pine trees. Ethan sat in the back with Lily pressed against his side, watching Manhattan slide past the tinted windows. Jennifer Reeves sat up front next to the driver, typing something on her phone. Nobody spoke. They pulled into the hospital's underground parking garage, a concrete cavern lit by fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead. Jennifer led them to a private elevator that required a keycard. The doors closed with a soft hiss, and they rose in silence. "She's in the executive suite," Jennifer said, still looking at her phone. "7th floor. Normally, we'd keep her in ICU for another 24 hours, but she refused. Said she needed to think clearly, and she couldn't do that with alarms going off every 30 seconds. "Sounds stubborn," Ethan said. You have no idea. The elevator opened onto a floor that looked nothing like the rest of the hospital. Hardwood floors. Actual artwork on the walls instead of generic prints. A sitting area with furniture that belonged in someone's expensive living room. This was where the rich people recovered from their surgeries in private rooms that cost more per night than most people made in a month. Jennifer stopped at a door near the end of the hall. She's still weak. Don't tire her out. She looked at Lily. Maybe your daughter should wait outside. No, Lily said firmly before Ethan could answer. Jennifer blinked, then something almost like a smile crossed her face. All right then. She knocked twice and opened the door. The room was bigger than Ethan's entire clinic back in Blackridge. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Manhattan skyline lit up against the evening sky. A couch, a television, a bathroom that probably had heated floors. And in the middle of it all, a hospital bed where Victoria Sterling sat propped up on pillows, looking pale and exhausted, but very much alive. She turned her head when they entered. Her eyes, dark brown, sharper than they had any right to be considering she'd been dying 3 hours ago, fixed on Ethan. Dr. Cole, she said. Her voice was rough, probably from the intubation tube. Thank you for coming back. Ms. Sterling, Ethan stayed near the door. I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm told I have you to thank for that. She shifted slightly in the bed, winced. The doctors explained what you did. None of them had ever seen that procedure performed successfully before. Most people haven't. It's risky. But you did it anyway. You were dying. So I'm told. Victoria's gaze moved to Lily. And who's this? My daughter, Lily. Hello, Lily. Lily waved her stuffed bear. Hi. Something changed in Victoria's expression, softened for just a moment before the sharp intensity returned. Dr. Cole, I asked you here because I owe you my life, but also because I know who you are. What happened to you 5 years ago? Ethan's jaw tightened. Then you know why I don't want to be here. I do, and I'm going to tell you something that will probably make you want to leave immediately. Victoria paused, took a breath that clearly hurt. My father owned shares in Medicare Pharmaceuticals through a shell corporation. They were one of the primary investors in the cost reduction initiative that led to your wife's death. The room went very quiet. Ethan felt Lily's hand slip into his, held on tight. My father died 3 years ago, Victoria continued. Cancer. I inherited everything, including business interests I didn't know existed. It took me 2 years to untangle all of it, sell off the problematic holdings, clean up the mess. But that doesn't change the fact that my family's money was connected to what happened to Sarah. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know. And because I want you to understand that I'm not asking you to forgive what happened or to forget it. I'm asking you to let me try to make it right. You can't make it right. Ethan's voice came out harder than he intended. My wife is dead. Your father's money helped kill her. No amount of... I know. Victoria cut him off, but gently. I know I can't bring her back. I know nothing I do will ever be enough. But I can tell you what really happened that day. The things the hospital never admitted to. Ethan went still. What do you mean? Sit down, Dr. Cole. Please. This is going to take a while. He didn't want to sit, wanted to grab Lily and walk out and never think about any of this again. But his feet moved anyway, carried him to the chair beside the bed. Lily climbed into his lap without being asked. Victoria reached for a glass of water on the bedside table. Her hand shook. She took a sip, set it down carefully. After I woke up and Dr. Hale told me what you'd done, I had my legal team pull every record related to your wife's case. Medical files, incident reports, insurance claims, internal memos, all of it. She paused. Sarah Cole, age 28, admitted for a routine appendectomy. Simple procedure. She should have been home in 2 days. I know what she was admitted for. But you don't know what actually killed her because they lied to you. Victoria's eyes held his. The anesthesiologist who handled her case, Dr. Raymond Chen, was working a double shift. He'd been on for 16 hours when Sarah went into surgery. Hospital policy clearly states no anesthesiologist works more than 12 consecutive hours, but they were understaffed that week and someone in administration approved the overtime. Ethan's chest felt tight. Go on. Dr. Chen made a mistake with the dosage. Not a huge one, but enough. Sarah had an adverse reaction during recovery. Her oxygen levels dropped. It should have been caught immediately, but the monitoring equipment in that particular recovery room had been flagged for maintenance 3 weeks earlier. The work order was delayed because the hospital was over budget for the quarter. Jesus, Ethan whispered. By the time a nurse noticed something was wrong and called for help, Sarah had been hypoxic for almost 4 minutes. They tried to resuscitate her, but the damage was too severe. She died at 11:47 p.m. Victoria's voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the effort it took. Dr. Chen was devastated, wrote a full confession, demanded the hospital take responsibility. I never saw any confession, because it disappeared. The hospital's legal team buried it. They paid Dr. Chen a settlement to stay quiet and leave the state. The equipment maintenance records were altered to show the machines had been working properly. And when you started investigating, they made sure you couldn't find anything that would hold up in court. Ethan couldn't breathe. 5 years he'd suspected something like this, but having it confirmed, hearing the actual details, felt like being cut open without anesthesia. Where's Dr. Chen now? He managed. Alaska. He quit medicine entirely, works as a fishing guide. And the administrators who approved the overtime, the people who delayed the maintenance? Most of them still work here. A few got promoted. Victoria shifted in the bed again, her face tight with pain. I'm sorry, Dr. Cole. I know this doesn't help, but you deserve to know the truth. Lily was crying quietly against Ethan's chest. He held her tighter, pressed his face against her hair, and tried to remember how to keep himself together. Why? He asked finally. Why tell me this now? Because I'm going to destroy them. Victoria's voice went cold. Every person who covered this up, every administrator who chose budget over safety, every lawyer who buried evidence. I'm going to burn this hospital's reputation to the ground and build something better from the ashes. But I need your help to do it. Ethan looked up. What? I want you to stay. Work with me. Help me find every other case like Sarah's, because there are others, I guarantee it. Help me document everything. And when we have enough evidence, help me present it to the medical board and the press and anyone else who'll listen. You're insane. Probably, but I'm also rich enough that they can't silence me the way they silenced you, and I'm angry enough not to care what it costs. Victoria met his eyes. I almost died in this hospital today. The same hospital where your wife died because they cut corners to save money. That's not a coincidence. It's a pattern, and patterns can be broken. You just woke up from a coma. Technically, it was medically induced unconsciousness, not a coma. Whatever it was, you should be resting, not planning some crusade against Dr. Cole. Victoria's voice sharpened. I didn't get where I am by resting when there's work to be done. Now, are you going to help me or not? They stared at each other. Outside the windows, the city glittered like broken glass. Lily had stopped crying, but she didn't let go of Ethan's shirt. I need time to think, Ethan said. You have until tomorrow morning. There's a hotel room reserved for you and your daughter 2 blocks from here. Jennifer will take you there. Get some sleep. Eat something that isn't from a gas station. Then come back and give me your answer. And if I say no, then I'll have my lawyers draft the biggest check you've ever seen, and you can go back to Montana and forget any of this happened. Victoria paused. But I don't think you will. Because if you were the kind of person who could forget, you wouldn't have spent 5 years in a town nobody's heard of treating people who can't pay their bills. Ethan stood, still holding Lily. You don't know anything about me. I know you came 2,000 miles to save the life of someone connected to your wife's death. That tells me everything I need to know. Jennifer was waiting in the hallway when they left the room. She led them back to the elevator without asking any questions, which Ethan appreciated. His head felt too full. Too much information. Too many emotions he'd buried 5 years ago now clawing their way back to the surface. The hotel was exactly the kind of place Ethan had never been able to afford. Marble lobby, doormen in uniforms, the front desk person who smiled like she actually meant it. Jennifer had already checked them in. She handed Ethan 2 key cards. Room 1847. It's a suite. There's a separate bedroom for Lily. She hesitated. For what it's worth, Dr. Cole, Victoria doesn't make offers like this lightly. She sees something in you. She sees someone she can use. Maybe, but she could use anyone. She's choosing you. Jennifer turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Dr. Hale asked me to tell you he'd like to speak with you tomorrow if you have time. No pressure. Tell him I'll think about it. The suite was absurd. Living room with a couch and chairs and a dining table. Kitchenette with a coffee maker that looked like it belonged in a science lab. 2 bathrooms. The bedroom had a bed big enough to sleep 4 people comfortably. Lily immediately ran to the windows and pressed her face against the glass. "Dad, look! You can see everything!" Ethan joined her. The view stretched across Manhattan, millions of lights spreading in every direction. He'd forgotten how beautiful the city could be from far enough away. "Are we staying?" Lily asked. "I don't know yet. Do you want to stay?" "I don't know that either." "What did the lady mean about Mom?" Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. Lily climbed up next to him, still clutching her bear. He tried to figure out how to explain it in a way that wouldn't give her nightmares. "The hospital made mistakes when they were taking care of Mom," he said slowly. "Bad mistakes. And then they lied about it so they wouldn't get in trouble. That's not fair." "No, it's not." "Is that why we left New York?" "Part of it, yeah." Lily was quiet for a moment, then, "If you help that lady, can you make them tell the truth?" "Maybe. I don't know." "Do you think Mom would want you to try?" Ethan closed his eyes. Sarah had been so adamant about doing the right thing even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. She'd once spent 6 months fighting their insurance company over a denied claim for one of her patients, a kid who needed physical therapy after a car accident. The insurance company had more lawyers than Sarah had sick days, but she'd won anyway through sheer stubborn persistence. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think she would." "Then I think you should do it. Even if it means we stay here for a while, you'd have to go to a new school, make new friends." Lily shrugged. "Emma Johnson back home picks her nose and tries to make me eat it. I can do better than Emma Johnson." Despite everything, Ethan laughed. "Okay, fair point." They ordered room service, Lily's first time having food brought to a hotel room, and ate overpriced pasta while watching cartoons Ethan didn't understand. After she fell asleep, he sat by the window and thought about Sarah and Victoria Sterling and whether it was possible to get justice for something that happened 5 years ago. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. Unknown. "This is Marcus. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. I'm sorry for what happened to Sarah, for not standing up to the administration, for letting them push you out. You were right about everything, and I was a coward. If you're willing to meet tomorrow, I'll tell you everything I know. If not, I understand." Ethan stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Ethan, 10 a.m., hospital cafeteria." The response came immediately. "Marcus." "I'll be there. Thank you." Ethan didn't sleep much that night either. Kept thinking about Dr. Chen in Alaska, about maintenance records that got altered, about all the other Sarah Coles who died because hospitals cared more about quarterly budgets than human lives. When morning came, he felt hollowed out but clear-headed. Lily woke up, and they ordered breakfast, more overpriced food that she thought was amazing, and then headed back to Manhattan Crown. The hospital looked different in daylight, less imposing, just a building full of people trying to save lives and also trying to make money. And sometimes those two things came into conflict, and people died because of it. The cafeteria was on the 2nd floor, a large space with too many tables and not enough windows. Marcus was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups of coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "You came?" Marcus said as Ethan approached. "I said I would." "Where's Lily?" "Children's wing. They have some kind of playroom. Jennifer's assistant is watching her." Ethan sat down across from Marcus. "You have 30 minutes. Marcus pushed one of the coffee cups toward him. "I've been working at this hospital for 14 years, department head for the last 7, and in that time I've seen things that would make you sick. Try me. 3 years ago we had an outbreak of post-surgical infections, 17 patients in 6 weeks. The source was contaminated equipment that hadn't been sterilized properly because the hospital switched to a cheaper sterilization service. 2 people died. The hospital settled quietly, and nothing ever made it to the press." Ethan's hands tightened around the coffee cup. "Last year," Marcus continued, "a diabetic patient went into a coma because a nurse gave her the wrong insulin dosage. The nurse was an agency temp working her 3rd consecutive shift because we were understaffed. The patient survived, but with permanent brain damage. Hospital called it an unavoidable complication." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you asked me once why I wouldn't back you up when you tried to expose what happened to Sarah. You said I was putting my career ahead of the truth. And you were right. Marcus looked tired, old. I told myself I could do more good by staying inside the system, that if I kept my head down and played the game, eventually I'd have enough power to change things. But all I did was become part of the problem. So what changed? Victoria Sterling almost died yesterday because I was too proud to admit I didn't know what I was doing. And then you walked in, someone I helped destroy 5 years ago, and saved her life anyway. That's when I realized I've been lying to myself about who I am. Ethan drank some coffee. It was terrible, burned and bitter. What do you want from me, Marcus? Nothing. I just wanted you to know that if you decide to stay and help Victoria tear this place apart, I'll help you. I have access to files you can't get to. I know where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, and I'm willing to testify to whatever you need. You'd lose your job. I should have lost it 5 years ago. Marcus smiled without humor. Better late than never, right? They sat in silence for a while. Around them, the cafeteria filled with hospital staff grabbing breakfast between shifts, doctors and nurses and orderlies, most of them probably decent people, just trying to do their jobs. But somewhere above them were administrators making decisions about budgets and efficiency and acceptable risk levels, and those decisions killed people. I haven't decided yet, Ethan said. If I'm staying. I know. But when you do decide, and I think we both know which way you're leaning, call me. I'll help however I can. Marcus stood. I need to get back to rounds, but Ethan, thank you for saving her and for not punching me in the face when you had the chance. Day's not over yet. Marcus actually laughed at that. Then he left, and Ethan sat alone with his terrible coffee and his thoughts. He found Lily in the children's wing, sitting at a table covered in markers and paper. She'd drawn a picture of what looked like their house in Montana, except it had wings and was flying through clouds. That's creative, Ethan said. It's our house if it could go anywhere, so we wouldn't have to choose between Montana and New York. She added more clouds. Did you talk to the doctor? Yeah. What did he say? That he's sorry for what he did, and that he wants to help make things better. Do you believe him? Ethan thought about that. I think he believes himself. Whether he actually follows through is different. They went back up to Victoria's room. She was sitting up in bed this time, looking stronger than she had the night before. A laptop was open on her lap, and she was typing one-handed while her other arm rested in a sling. You should be resting, Ethan said from the doorway. And you should be in Montana, but here we are. Victoria closed the laptop. Have you made a decision? I have questions first. All right. If we do this, if we actually try to expose what's been happening, it's going to get ugly. They'll fight back, use lawyers, PR firms, whatever it takes to discredit us. Are you prepared for that? Yes. They might come after your company, your reputation, everything you've built. Let them try. Victoria's eyes were hard. I have better lawyers. And what about after? Assuming we actually succeed and bring down the people responsible. What then? Then we build something better. A hospital that actually puts patients first. Medical care that doesn't bankrupt people. A system where doctors like you don't have to choose between their ethics and their careers. She paused. I'm not naive, Dr. Cole. I know we can't fix everything, but we can fix this, starting here. Ethan looked at Lily. She gave him a small nod. Okay, he said. I'm in, but I have conditions. Name them. First, Lily's safety is non-negotiable. If at any point this puts her at risk, we stop. Agreed. Second, I want full access to everything. Medical records, financial documents, internal communications. No holding back information because you think I can't handle it. Done. Third, when this is over, assuming we're both still standing, I want a job. Not here. Somewhere else. A clinic in a neighborhood where people actually need help. You fund it, I run it, and nobody tells me how to practice medicine. Victoria smiled. Dr. Cole, I think that might be the easiest condition anyone's ever given me. Anything else? Yeah, stop calling me Dr. Cole, it's Ethan. All right, Ethan, you can call me Victoria. She held out her hand. Partners? Ethan shook it. Her grip was still weak, but her eyes were steady. Partners. Good. Because we're going to need to move fast. I've already started making calls. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss my medical incident. I want to be there with evidence of every other incident they've covered up in the last decade. That's less than 24 hours. So we better get started. The next 18 hours were chaos. Victoria's legal team descended on the hospital like a corporate army, armed with subpoenas and records requests, and the kind of authority that came from representing someone with $8 billion. Ethan worked with Marcus to pull patient files and incident reports, anything that showed a pattern of negligence or cover-ups. They found more than either of them expected. Lily stayed in Victoria's room, doing homework on the couch while the adults worked. Every so often, Victoria would take a break to help with math problems or ask Lily's opinion on something, and Ethan would watch his daughter talk to the billionaire CEO like they were old friends and wonder what his life had become. By midnight, they had a file 3 inches thick. Documented cases of preventable deaths, equipment failures, understaffing incidents, all of it buried by the hospital's administration. "This is damning," Marcus said quietly, flipping through pages. "If even half of this gets out—" "It's all getting out," Victoria said. She looked exhausted, but her voice was firm. Every word, every number, every name. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. the next day. Victoria insisted on attending despite her doctor's protests. Ethan went with her, leaving Lily with Jennifer, who'd become an unexpected but reliable babysitter. The boardroom was on the 15th floor, all glass walls and expensive furniture. 12 board members sat around a massive table, men and women in suits that cost more than Ethan's truck. At the head of the table sat Richard Westbrook, the hospital's CEO, a man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Ms. Sterling," he said as Victoria entered, "we're all so relieved to see you recovered. However, I'm not sure this meeting is appropriate given your recent medical crisis." "Sit down, Richard." Victoria took a seat at the table. Ethan stood behind her. "We have things to discuss." Westbrook's smile tightened. "Of course, the board has reviewed the incident, and we want to assure you that I know about the XR9 device reaction. I know your cardiac team nearly killed me because they were following outdated protocols. I know Dr. Hale requested outside consultation, but was overruled by hospital administration because you didn't want to admit you needed help." Victoria's voice was calm but cutting. "I also know about Sarah Cole, and the infection outbreak in 2023, and the insulin incident last year. Should I continue?" The room went very quiet. One of the board members, a woman with gray hair, spoke up. "Ms. Sterling, I'm not sure what you think you know, but I know everything." Victoria opened her laptop. "I have documentation of 43 preventable patient deaths over the last 10 years. 17 instances of equipment failure due to cost-cutting measures. 27 cases where staff fatigue directly contributed to medical errors. And extensive evidence that this board has systematically covered up every single incident to protect the hospital's reputation and financial standing." Westbrook stood. "This is outrageous. I don't know who's been feeding you these lies, but Dr. Marcus Hale, Dr. Jennifer Reeves, your own internal audit reports from 2022 and 2024. Should I continue?" Victoria looked at each board member in turn. "I'm giving you one opportunity to do the right thing. Resign, all of you. Issue a public statement acknowledging the hospital's failures. Establish an independent review board to investigate every case. And most importantly, stop prioritizing profits over patients. And if we refuse?" Westbrook's face had gone red. "Then I go to the press, the medical board, the state attorney general. I have enough evidence to bury this hospital and everyone in this room." Victoria paused. "I'm a majority shareholder in Sterling Biotech, which supplies 40% of your pharmaceutical needs. I sit on the board of 3 insurance companies that handle 60% of your patients, and I have enough money to fund a legal battle that will last longer than any of you have left in your careers. So I'll ask again. Do you want to do this the easy way or the hard way?" Nobody spoke. Ethan watched the board members exchange glances, watched the reality of their situation sink in. Victoria Sterling had them cornered, and they knew it. Finally, Westbrook sat back down. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A complete restructuring. New leadership focused on patient care rather than profit margins. Transparent reporting of all medical errors. Fair compensation for the families of patients who died due to negligence. And a partnership with Dr. Ethan Cole to establish new protocols that actually protect patients instead of the hospital's bottom line." One of the other board members looked at Ethan. And who exactly is Dr. Cole? The man who saved my life when your entire cardiac department couldn't, Victoria said flatly. Also the husband of Sarah Cole, who died in this hospital 5 years ago while you were busy covering your asses. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. The meeting lasted another 2 hours. Threats were made, mostly by the board. Victoria countered each one with evidence or leverage or the kind of cold determination that came from almost dying and deciding you were done playing nice. By the time it ended, Westbrook and 4 other board members had agreed to resign. The others were taking time to consider their positions, which meant their lawyers were probably already working on deals. Walking out of that boardroom felt like walking out of a burning building. Ethan's hands were shaking again and his heart was racing and he felt simultaneously triumphant and terrified. That was insane, he said once they were in the elevator. That was necessary. Victoria leaned against the wall, looking pale. Are you okay? I should be asking you that. You just threatened a dozen powerful people while recovering from cardiac failure. I've done worse on less sleep. She smiled slightly. How do you feel? Like I just watched someone declare war. Good. Because that's exactly what we did. The elevator doors opened. Now comes the hard part, actually building something better from the wreckage. They found Lily in the children's wing again, this time reading to a group of younger kids. Some story about a princess and a dragon. The kids were completely engrossed. Lily saw Ethan and waved, but kept reading. She's good with them, Victoria said quietly. She's good with everyone. Gets that from her mother. Sarah would be proud of you, for today. Maybe. Or maybe she'd tell me I should have done this 5 years ago instead of running away. You didn't run away, you survived. There's a difference. Victoria watched Lily finish the story, watched the kids clap. You're a good father, Ethan. Don't forget that while we're trying to save the world. That night, back at the hotel, Ethan sat on the balcony while Lily slept and thought about what came next. The board would fight back. The press would get involved. Lives would be torn apart, including possibly his own. But somewhere in Alaska, a former anesthesiologist who'd made a terrible mistake might finally get to stop running. And somewhere in this city, families who'd lost loved ones might finally get answers. And somewhere down the line, maybe fewer people would die because hospitals decided quarterly profits mattered more than human lives. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Victoria. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about Sarah. About all of them. How many people have we lost because good people stayed quiet? Ethan typed back. Ethan. Too many. But we're not staying quiet anymore. Victoria. No, we're not. Get some rest, partner. Tomorrow we start building something better. Ethan looked out at the city, at all those lights hiding all those lives, and for the first time in 5 years felt like maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he needed to be. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Ethan was making coffee in the hotel kitchenette when his phone started buzzing with news alerts. Then it didn't stop. Victoria's press conference was scheduled for 9 a.m., but someone had leaked parts of the documentation early, and now every major news outlet in the country was running variations of the same headline. Billionaire CEO exposes deadly cover-ups at Manhattan's most prestigious hospital. Dad? Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. Why is your phone making so much noise? Because something big just happened. Ethan silenced the notifications. Get dressed. We need to leave soon. The press conference was being held at Sterling Biotech's headquarters, a glass tower in Midtown that made Manhattan Crown look modest by comparison. Victoria's security team had arranged for Ethan and Lily to enter through a side entrance away from the cameras already gathering out front. Jennifer met them in the lobby. She looked wired, running on coffee and adrenaline. Victoria's upstairs getting ready. The legal team wants to brief you before we start. Brief me on what? How to handle questions if the press tries to ambush you afterward. What you can and can't say without opening yourself up to lawsuits. The usual. Jennifer glanced at Lily. There's a private office she can wait in during the conference. It'll be boring, but safe. I want to watch, Lily said. Sweetheart, it's just going to be adults talking about complicated stuff. I want to watch, she repeated, more firmly this time. Ethan looked at Jennifer, who shrugged. There's a viewing room with a live feed. She can watch from there. The legal briefing took 20 minutes and mostly consisted of a woman in an expensive suit telling Ethan to say no comment to anything he wasn't absolutely certain about. Then they were hustled upstairs to a large conference room that had been converted into a makeshift press area. Rows of chairs filled with reporters, camera crews setting up in the back. The low buzz of dozens of conversations happening at once. Victoria stood off to the side talking to her communications director. She'd traded the hospital gown for a dark blue suit that probably cost more than Ethan made in a month, but she still looked tired, still recovering. When she saw Ethan, she excused herself and walked over. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I'm about to piss off a lot of very powerful people." She smiled tightly. "So, pretty good, actually. You don't have to do this today. You could wait until you're stronger. If I wait, they'll have time to prepare, to spin the narrative, to make me look like some vindictive billionaire with an axe to grind." Victoria straightened her jacket. "No, it has to be now." A young man with a headset approached. "Ms. Sterling, we're ready when you are." Victoria nodded, then looked at Ethan. "Stay close. I might need you up there if they start questioning the medical details." "I'm not good with cameras." "Neither am I. We'll be terrible together." She walked to the front of the room, and the conversations died down. Cameras turned on with small red lights. Reporters pulled out notebooks and recorders. The room got very quiet very fast. Victoria stood behind a podium, hands gripping the edges. For a moment, she just looked at the assembled press corps, and Ethan could see her gathering herself. Then she spoke. 10 days ago, I collapsed during a press conference. I was rushed to Manhattan Crown Medical Center, where I received treatment for a cardiac emergency. I was told I had the best doctors in the country working to save my life. She paused. They were killing me. The room erupted. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, everyone trying to be heard at once. Victoria waited until the noise died down before continuing. The medical team at Manhattan Crown misdiagnosed my condition and administered treatments that made it worse. I survived only because a doctor who no longer works at that hospital, a doctor they forced out 5 years ago for trying to expose their negligence, came back and saved my life using a procedure none of their specialists had ever seen performed successfully. More shouting. Victoria raised her hand. That doctor's name is Ethan Cole. 5 years ago, his wife Sarah died at Manhattan Crown Medical Center during what should have been a routine procedure. Dr. Cole investigated her death and discovered evidence of systemic negligence and cost-cutting measures that directly contributed to her death. When he tried to bring this evidence forward, the hospital buried it. They paid off witnesses, they altered records, they destroyed his career and forced him to leave medicine entirely. Ethan felt every eye in the room turn toward him. He kept his expression neutral, hands shoved in his pockets. Over the past week, with Dr. Cole's help, my legal team has uncovered documentation of 43 preventable patient deaths at Manhattan Crown over the last decade. Equipment failures due to deferred maintenance, medical errors caused by understaffing, systematic cover-ups by hospital administration to protect their reputation and profit margins. Victoria's voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the anger underneath. "This ends today." She nodded to someone off stage. A screen behind her lit up with the first page of documentation. Names had been redacted, but the details were clear enough. A woman who died from a post-surgical infection, a man who coded because monitoring equipment failed, a child who suffered permanent brain damage from a medication error. "These are real people," Victoria said. "They had families, lives, futures, and they're gone because Manhattan Crown Medical Center chose quarterly profits over patient safety. Because administrators approved cost-cutting measures they knew were dangerous. Because doctors were pressured to keep quiet about mistakes." The room was dead silent now. Even the reporters had stopped shuffling papers. "I'm releasing all of this documentation to the press, the state medical board, and the Attorney General's office. I'm also announcing that I will be funding legal representation for the families of every patient who died due to Manhattan Crown's negligence. And I'm calling for a full federal investigation into hospital administration practices nationwide because I guarantee you this isn't isolated to one hospital." A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Victoria nodded. "Ms. Sterling, you're a major investor in several healthcare companies. Aren't you essentially attacking your own industry?" "I'm attacking an industry that's broken, that prioritizes profit over people. that allows good doctors to be silenced and bad administrators to face no consequences. Victoria's eyes were hard. And yes, some of my investments will suffer. I don't care. Some things are more important than money. Another reporter, what about Dr. Cole? Is he facing any legal consequences for leaving his position 5 years ago? Dr. Cole didn't leave. He was forced out. And the only people who should be facing legal consequences are the ones who covered up patient deaths. Victoria glanced at Ethan. Dr. Cole has agreed to work with me on establishing new patient safety protocols. He's also going to help me build something better. Which is what exactly? A hospital that actually serves the people who need it most. But we'll get to that. Victoria straightened. I'll take a few more questions, but keep them focused on Manhattan Crown. We can talk about future plans another time. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Reporters firing questions about specific cases, about the board members who'd resigned, about whether criminal charges would be filed. Victoria handled each one with the kind of controlled precision that came from years of corporate negotiations. She gave details where she could, deflected where she couldn't, and never once lost her composure. Finally, her communications director stepped forward. That's all for today. Ms. Sterling will be releasing additional statements as the investigation progresses. Thank you. Victoria stepped away from the podium and was immediately surrounded by her team. Ethan stayed where he was, trying to become invisible, but it didn't work. 3 reporters found him before he could reach the exit. Dr. Cole, how does it feel to finally get justice for your wife? No comment. Are you planning to return to medicine full-time? No comment. Do you think criminal charges will be filed against hospital administrators? That's up to prosecutors. Now, if you'll excuse me, Dr. Cole. A woman pushed through the small crowd. Rebecca Martinez, New York Times. Can you tell us about the night Sarah died? Ethan stopped, looked at her. The reporter held his gaze, pen poised over her notebook. She went in for an appendectomy, he said quietly. Simple procedure. She was supposed to be home in 2 days. Instead, she died because an overworked anesthesiologist made a mistake with her dosage and the monitoring equipment that should have caught it was broken. The hospital knew both of those things were problems, and they let them happen anyway. And you've spent 5 years trying to prove that? I've spent 5 years trying to live with it. Ethan pushed past her. We're done here. He found Lily in the viewing room, sitting in a chair that was too big for her, clutching her stuffed bear. She looked up when he entered. That was scary, she said. Yeah, it was. Ethan sat down next to her. You okay? I think so. All those people asking about Mom. She trailed off. I know. I'm sorry you had to hear that. It's okay. I mean, it's not okay that she died, but it's okay to talk about it. Lily leaned against him. Victoria said you're going to build a hospital? Something like that. Will it be a good one? Where people don't die by accident? We're going to try our best. They sat there for a while, watching through the window as the press conference wrapped up and reporters filed out. Eventually, Jennifer found them and said Victoria wanted to meet. They reconvened in Victoria's office on the 48th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Manhattan spreading in every direction. Victoria stood by the glass, still in her suit, looking out at the city. Well, she said without turning around. That happened. The phones are going crazy, Jennifer reported. Every news outlet wants a follow-up interview. The Attorney General's office has already opened an inquiry, and Manhattan Crown just released a statement saying they're shocked and saddened and committed to full transparency moving forward. Which means their lawyers are in full damage control mode. Victoria finally turned around. She looked exhausted. Ethan, I need you to do something for me. What? There's a family in Brooklyn. David and Michelle Patterson. Their daughter Emma died at Manhattan Crown 3 years ago during a routine tonsillectomy, post-surgical infection that the hospital blamed on an underlying immune condition Emma didn't actually have. Victoria walked to her desk, pulled out a file. I want you to go talk to them. Explain what really happened. Tell them they're not alone. Ethan took the file. Why me? Because you understand what they're going through. Because you can speak to them as someone who lost his wife, the same way they lost their daughter. Because they deserve to hear it from a doctor who actually gives a damn. Victoria sat down heavily in her chair. And because I need to know if I'm doing the right thing. Exposing all of this, tearing everything apart. I need to know it's going to help people and not just satisfy my own need for revenge. You don't need me to tell you that. Maybe I do. Maybe I need someone to remind me what this is actually about. She looked at Lily. Your dad's a good man, even when he's angry, especially when he's angry. Ethan opened the file. Emma Patterson had been 9 years old. Same age Lily would be in 2 years. The report was clinical, detached, full of medical terminology that hid the fact that a child had died screaming in pain from an infection that should never have happened. Okay, he said. I'll go. The Patterson family lived in a brownstone in a neighborhood that was trying hard to be nice, but not quite making it. Ethan stood on the front steps for a full minute before ringing the doorbell. Lily waited beside him, quiet. A woman in her 40s answered. Tired eyes. Hair pulled back. She looked at Ethan with the kind of suspicion people develop when too many strangers have disappointed them. Mrs. Patterson, my name is Ethan Cole. Victoria Sterling sent me. I was hoping we could talk about your daughter. The woman's expression changed, hardened. If you're another lawyer trying to get us to sign something, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a doctor. My wife died at Manhattan Crown 5 years ago, same hospital where you lost Emma. Michelle Patterson stared at him, then at Lily, then back at him. You're the one from the press conference. Yes, ma'am. She hesitated, then stepped back. Come in. The house was clean but worn, furniture that had seen better days, photos on the walls of a little girl with a gap-toothed smile. Emma. Michelle led them to a living room where a man sat on the couch, David Patterson, presumably. He looked up when they entered. David, this is Dr. Cole. He's here about Emma. David stood. We already talked to Sterling's lawyers, signed the papers they sent over. Are we supposed to do something else? No. I'm not here in any official capacity. Ethan sat when Michelle gestured to a chair. Lily settled on the floor by his feet. I'm here because Victoria wanted you to hear from someone who understands what you went through, someone who knows what it's like to lose someone to that hospital's negligence. Michelle sat down next to her husband. Your wife, Sarah? Yes. Appendectomy that should have been simple. She died from complications that never should have happened. Emma had a tonsillectomy, Michelle said quietly. They told us it was routine, that she'd be home the next day. Instead, she got an infection. By the time they realized how bad it was, she stopped, swallowed hard. David took her hand. They told us her immune system was compromised, that she had an underlying condition. Made it sound like there was nothing they could have done. That was a lie, Ethan said. The infection came from equipment that wasn't properly sterilized. The hospital had switched to a cheaper sterilization service 3 months earlier. Emma wasn't the only patient who got infected. There were 16 others. 2 of them died. Michelle's hand went to her mouth. David's face went white. The hospital knew the equipment was the problem, Ethan continued. They knew it within days, but admitting that would have meant taking responsibility, facing lawsuits, losing money. So they blamed the patients instead, made up conditions they didn't have, buried the evidence. Oh my God, Michelle whispered. Oh my God. I'm so sorry, Ethan said. You deserve to know the truth. Emma deserved better than what they gave her. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then David stood abruptly and walked to the window. His shoulders were shaking. Michelle wiped at her eyes, but tears kept coming. We thought... She started, then stopped, tried again. We thought maybe we did something wrong. Maybe we missed signs that something was wrong with her. Maybe if we'd taken her to a different hospital or asked more questions or... None of that would have made a difference, Ethan said firmly. The equipment was contaminated. It didn't matter how healthy Emma was, or which hospital you chose, or what questions you asked. The people responsible for sterilizing that equipment failed, and the administrators who knew about it chose to cover it up instead of fixing it. Can we sue them? David turned from the window. I know Sterling's people already drew up papers, but can we sue them for more? Make them pay for what they did? You can try. Victoria will back you up. But I need you to understand something. Ethan leaned forward. Lawsuits take years. They're exhausting and painful, and they'll make you relive Emma's death over and over again. The hospital has lawyers who are very good at dragging things out, at making you feel like you're crazy for pursuing it, at making the whole thing so miserable you eventually just want it to be over. So we should just let them get away with it? Michelle's voice rose. Let them keep killing people's children? No. I'm saying decide why you're doing this. If it's about money, take the settlement Victoria's offering and try to move forward. If it's about justice, about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else, then fight. But know what you're getting into. David and Michelle looked at each other, some silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Michelle spoke. What would you do? If it was your daughter? Ethan glanced down at Lily. She was listening to everything, taking it all in with those dark eyes that saw too much. I'd burn the whole place down, he said quietly. But I'm not sure that's the healthy choice. I'm still trying to figure out if getting revenge is the same thing as getting justice. Is that why you're helping Victoria? David asked. To figure that out? Partly. Also because she's right. This has to stop. If that means going to war with the entire hospital industry, then I guess that's what we're doing. They talked for another hour. Ethan explained what he knew about the other cases, about the documentation Victoria had compiled, about the investigation that was just beginning. Michelle and David asked questions about the legal process, about how to talk to their other kids about what really happened, about whether they'd ever stop feeling like they'd failed their daughter. Ethan didn't have good answers for most of it. He told them the truth, that it never really stops hurting, but eventually you learn to carry it better. That some days are worse than others. That being angry is okay, but it shouldn't be the only thing you feel. When they finally left, Michelle hugged Ethan at the door. Thank you for coming, for telling us the truth. I'm sorry it took this long. Better late than never. She knelt down to Lily's level. You take care of your dad, okay? He seems like he needs someone to keep an eye on him. Lily nodded seriously. I try, but he drinks too much coffee and doesn't sleep enough. Michelle smiled, the first genuine smile Ethan had seen from her. Sounds like most doctors I know. Walking back to where they'd parked, Lily was quiet. Ethan gave her space, let her process whatever she was thinking. They were almost at the car when she finally spoke. Do you think Emma would be proud of what her parents are going to do? I think so. Why? Because I was thinking about Mom, about whether she'd be proud of what you're doing. Lily looked up at him. And I think she would be, even if it's hard. Yeah, me too. They drove back to Manhattan in afternoon traffic. Ethan's phone kept buzzing. Texts from Victoria, from Marcus, from reporters who'd somehow gotten his number. He ignored all of it, just focused on driving, on getting them back to the hotel in one piece. But they didn't go to the hotel. Ethan found himself driving to Manhattan Crown instead. He parked across the street and sat there with the engine off, staring at the building where Sarah had died, where he'd spent months trying to prove what had happened, where his entire life had fallen apart. Why are we here? Lily asked. I don't know. Ethan gripped the steering wheel. Maybe I needed to see it, to remind myself why we're doing this. Do you hate it? The hospital? I used to, so much it scared me sometimes. He took a breath. Now I just feel tired, like I've been carrying something heavy for a long time and I'm finally about to put it down. Is that good? I think so. I hope so. His phone rang, Victoria's name on the screen. Ethan answered. Where are you? She asked. Across from Manhattan Crown, just sitting here. How did it go with the Pattersons? Hard. They're going to fight. I think they need to. Good. I've got 3 more families lined up for tomorrow. Can you handle that? Yeah, I can handle it. Ethan watched nurses coming and going through the hospital's entrance. Some of them probably good people just trying to help. Others probably part of the problem. Hard to tell from the outside. Victoria, are we doing the right thing, tearing all of this open? I ask myself that every hour. But then I think about Emma Patterson, about Sarah, about every person who died because good people stayed quiet. She paused. We're doing the right thing, Ethan. It's just going to hurt like hell before it gets better. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. Welcome to the club. Now get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be worse. She hung up. Ethan sat there a while longer, then started the car and drove back to the hotel. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan stood on the balcony and thought about Dr. Chen in Alaska, about whether the man ever thought about Sarah, whether he'd spent the last 5 years wishing he could take back one moment, one miscalculation that cost someone her life. His phone buzzed with an email. The subject line read, From Raymond Chen. Ethan's finger hovered over it for a long time before he finally opened it. Dr. Cole, I saw the press conference. I've been waiting 5 years for this day, hoping someone would finally tell the truth about what happened at that hospital. I never thought it would be you. I think about Sarah every single day. I see her face when I close my eyes. I hear her voice in my dreams. I know saying I'm sorry doesn't mean anything, doesn't bring her back, doesn't undo what I did. But I am sorry. More than you'll ever know. I left medicine because I couldn't be trusted with people's lives anymore. One mistake. One moment of being too tired to think straight, and a woman died because of me. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If you never want to hear from me again, I understand that too. I'm sorry. R.C. Ethan read the email 3 times. Then he closed his phone and went back to staring at the city lights. He didn't know if he could ever forgive Dr. Chen. Didn't know if forgiveness was even the right word for what he felt. The man had made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But the hospital had created the conditions that made that mistake possible. Overworked staff, broken equipment, a culture that prioritized efficiency over safety. Dr. Chen was a symptom. The real disease was the system itself. Ethan thought about replying, but he didn't know what to say. So he left the email unread and went to bed, where he didn't sleep but at least pretended to try. The next morning started early. Victoria had arranged meetings with 3 more families who'd lost people to Manhattan Crown's negligence. Ethan spent the day listening to stories about mothers and fathers and children and grandparents, all of them dead. All of them failed by a system that was supposed to protect them. By the 3rd meeting, he felt hollowed out, like he'd used up whatever capacity he had for other people's grief, and now he was just going through the motions. But that night, back at the hotel, he got a call from David Patterson. "Michelle and I talked," David said. "We want to help, however we can. If other families need to hear from someone who understands, we'll talk to them. If you need people to testify or go public or whatever, we're in." "You don't have to do that." "Yeah, we do. Because if we don't, nothing changes. Emma died for nothing, and I can't accept that." After he hung up, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and felt something shift in his chest. Not quite hope, not quite peace, but maybe something close to purpose. He walked into the living room where Lily was drawing. She looked up when he entered. "You okay, Dad?" "I think I might be," he said. "Eventually." She smiled and went back to her drawing. And for the first time since they'd come to New York, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to survive this. The Attorney General's investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, federal subpoenas landed at Manhattan Crown Medical Center like mortar shells. Victoria's documentation had given them enough probable cause to dig deeper, and what they found was worse than even Ethan had imagined. He was sitting in Victoria's office when the lead investigator called with an update. Victoria put it on speaker. "We've identified a pattern going back 15 years, the investigator said. Her name was Catherine Ross, and she sounded like someone who'd stopped being surprised by human corruption a long time ago. Equipment maintenance deferred to meet budget targets, staffing cuts that left units dangerously understaffed, pharmaceutical kickbacks that influenced which medications got prescribed. It's systemic." "How many cases?" Victoria asked. "So far?" 68 deaths that we can directly link to negligence, but that's just what we found in preliminary review. The real number is probably higher. Ethan felt sick. 68 people. 68 families like the Pattersons, like his. "What happens now?" he asked. "Criminal referrals for at least a dozen hospital administrators, civil charges against the hospital corporation itself, and a lot of very expensive lawyers trying to make this go away." Catherine paused. "Ms. Sterling, I need to ask, are you prepared for how ugly this is about to get?" "Yes," Victoria said without hesitation. "I'm not sure you are. These people have resources, political connections. They're going to come after you personally, your company, your reputation. They're going to dig up every mistake you've ever made and plaster it across every news outlet that'll run it. Let them try. They'll also come after Dr. Cole. He's the emotional center of this story. If they can discredit him, they can undermine the entire case." Ethan and Victoria looked at each other across the desk. "I don't have anything to hide," Ethan said. "Everyone has something to hide, Dr. Cole. The question is whether you're ready for strangers to find it." After Catherine hung up, Victoria leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She still looked tired most days. The cardiac device had been removed successfully 2 weeks ago, but recovery was slow. Her doctors kept telling her to rest. She kept ignoring them. "You should go home," Ethan said. "Get some actual sleep." "Can't. I have 3 conference calls this afternoon and a board meeting at 6. Victoria T? I'm fine. You're not fine. You almost died a month ago, and you've been running yourself into the ground ever since. She opened her eyes. I don't have time to not be fine, Ethan. The moment I slow down, they win. You know that. I know you're going to collapse again if you don't take care of yourself. Then you'll save me again. That's what partners do, right? She was joking, but Ethan didn't smile. I'm serious. Lily asked me yesterday if you ever sleep. I couldn't give her a good answer. How is Lily? I haven't seen her in a few days. Stop changing the subject. I'm not changing it. I'm genuinely asking. She started at the new school this week, didn't she? Ethan sighed. Yeah. She seems to like it. Made friends with a girl in her class named Sophie. They're both obsessed with some book series about wizards. That's good. Kids are resilient. She asked me last night if we're staying in New York permanently. I didn't know what to tell her. Victoria sat forward. What do you want to tell her? I don't know. A month ago, I couldn't wait to get out of this city. Now He trailed off. Now you're what? Now I'm starting to think maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. Which terrifies me because the last time I thought that, everything fell apart. Victoria watched him for a long moment. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago, Ethan. You're stronger now, more careful, and you're not alone this time. Neither are you, so maybe take your own advice and let people help you before you burn out. Fine, I'll rest, after the board meeting. Victoria, after, I promise. She didn't rest. The board meeting ran until midnight, and the next morning she was back in the office at 7, already on her second cup of coffee by the time Ethan arrived. He'd stopped trying to change her mind about things. Stubbornness was apparently a requirement for billionaire CEOs. What he didn't expect was the news Marcus brought that afternoon. Ethan was reviewing patient files in a borrowed office at Sterling Biotech. Victoria had given him space to work since he couldn't exactly go back to Manhattan Crown, when Marcus appeared in the doorway looking shaken. We need to talk, Marcus said. What happened? Marcus closed the door behind him and sat down heavily. I got a call this morning from Hospital Legal. They're offering me a deal, full immunity from criminal prosecution if I testify that you coerced me into providing false information about patient deaths. The room went very quiet. They want you to lie, Ethan said slowly. Yes, they're claiming you had a vendetta against the hospital because of Sarah, that you manipulated evidence and pressured me into supporting your narrative. They've even got a psychological profile drawn up arguing that you've been obsessed with revenge for 5 years and that this whole thing is just... Marcus stopped, shook his head. It's all garbage, complete fiction, but it's well-constructed fiction. Are you going to take the deal? Marcus looked at him like he'd been slapped. What? No, of course not. You'd have immunity, protection. Your career would survive. Ethan, I'm not... Marcus stood abruptly. I know I failed you before. I know I chose my career over doing the right thing when Sarah died, but I'm not making that mistake again. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. Marcus walked to the window. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I convinced myself I could do more good by staying inside the system. But you were right. I just became part of the problem, and maybe I can't undo that. Maybe I can't fix what I broke, but I can stop breaking more things. Ethan didn't say anything for a moment. Then, they're going to destroy you when you refuse. You know that. I know. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror again. That's not nothing. No, it's not. Marcus turned back around. I wanted you to hear it from me first, before they leak their version to the press. When do you think that'll happen? Probably tonight. They'll want to control the narrative, get ahead of any response we might prepare. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. Or right now. They just sent me a courtesy copy of the press release. It goes out in 20 minutes. Ethan grabbed his phone and called Victoria. She answered on the second ring. We've got a problem, he said. 15 minutes later, they were all in Victoria's office. Ethan, Marcus, Victoria, Jennifer, and a crisis management specialist named David Chen, who'd been hired specifically for situations like this. David read through the hospital's press release on his tablet, his expression getting darker by the second. This is sophisticated. They're not directly accusing Dr. Cole of fabricating evidence. That would be too easy to disprove. Instead, they're questioning his mental state, his motivations, his credibility. They're painting him as a tragic figure consumed by grief who's being manipulated by Ms. Sterling for her own purposes. What purposes would those be? Victoria asked coldly. Leverage against the hospital for a business dispute. They're implying you manufactured this entire scandal to gain control of their real estate holdings. That's insane. It's effective. It gives them a narrative that doesn't require them to address the actual evidence. The dead patients become background noise. The focus shifts to whether we can be trusted. David set down his tablet. They're very good at this. So what do we do? Ethan asked. We get ahead of it, issue our own statement, double down on the evidence, and we find someone completely unimpeachable to verify our findings independently. Who? Victoria asked. The families, Marcus said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. The Pattersons. The other families Dr. Cole has been meeting with. They're the ones who lost people. They're the ones who can speak to what happened without any appearance of bias or ulterior motives. We can't ask them to do that, Ethan protested. They've been through enough. Putting them on camera, exposing them to media scrutiny, then don't ask them. Offer them the choice, explain what's happening, and let them decide. Marcus looked at Ethan. You said David Patterson told you he wanted to fight, that Emma died for nothing if nothing changes. Maybe this is how they fight. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'll have my team reach out to the families we've been working with. See who's willing to speak publicly. In the meantime, David, draft a response to the hospital's statement. Make it clear we have documentation to support every single claim we've made. Already on it, David said, fingers flying across his tablet. The next few hours were chaos. Phone calls to family members, emergency meetings with lawyers, drafting and redrafting statements. By 7 p.m., they had commitments from 5 families willing to speak on camera, including the Pattersons. By 8 p.m., the hospital's press release had hit every major news outlet. Ethan's phone exploded with calls from reporters wanting comment. He ignored all of them. By 9 p.m., they'd scheduled a press conference for the next morning. 5 families. Their stories. Their losses. Their truth. Ethan went back to the hotel around midnight. Lily was asleep on the couch, a book open on her chest. The TV was still on, showing the news coverage of the hospital's accusations. He turned it off, carried Lily to bed, then stood in the doorway watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, innocent, unaware that tomorrow her father was going to become the center of a media firestorm that would either vindicate him or destroy him. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. Victoria, can't sleep. You? Ethan, same. How are you holding up? Victoria, I keep thinking about what Catherine said, about how they're going to come after us personally, and I'm wondering what they're going to find. Ethan, having second thoughts? Victoria, no, just scared. Is that normal? Ethan, I think so. I'm terrified. Victoria, good. At least we're terrified together. He smiled despite everything. There was something oddly comforting about that. The press conference the next morning was held in a community center in Brooklyn, deliberately chosen to feel less corporate than Sterling Biotech headquarters. Rows of chairs filled with reporters, cameras everywhere. The 5 families sat at a table up front, looking nervous but determined. Ethan sat off to the side with Victoria and Marcus. He'd wanted to stand with the families, but Victoria had convinced him it would look better if they spoke for themselves without him hovering. David Patterson went first. He talked about Emma, about how bright she'd been, how much she'd loved reading, how she'd wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. Then he talked about the tonsillectomy, about being told it was routine, about getting the call that something had gone wrong. They told us Emma's immune system had failed her, David said, voice steady but thick with emotion. They made it sound like her body had betrayed her, like there was nothing anyone could have done. For 3 years we believed that. We blamed ourselves for not seeing signs that something was wrong with her, for not pushing for more tests, for not being better parents. He paused, wiped his eyes. Then Dr. Cole knocked on our door and told us the truth, that Emma had died because the hospital used contaminated equipment to save money, that 16 other patients got infected the same way, that the hospital knew and covered it up. David's voice cracked. My daughter didn't die because her body failed. She died because people who were supposed to protect her chose profit over safety. Michelle Patterson spoke next, then the other families. Each story was different, but the pattern was the same. Preventable deaths, cover-ups. Families left believing they'd somehow failed their loved ones when the reality was the system had failed everyone. By the time the last family finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even some of the reporters looked shaken. Then the questions started. Mrs. Patterson, the hospital has claimed that Dr. Cole may have misrepresented facts about your daughter's case. How do you respond? Michelle's jaw tightened. I respond by saying that Dr. Cole is the only person who's been honest with us. The only person who treated Emma's death like it mattered. If the hospital wants to call him a liar, they can explain why their own internal documents confirm everything he told us. Mr. Chen, there are allegations that Ms. Sterling is using this scandal for business purposes. Do you have any concerns that you're being manipulated? A man whose son had died from a medication error leaned forward to the microphone. The only people manipulating anyone are the hospital administrators who covered up my son's death. Ms. Sterling is the first person with enough money and power to actually fight them. If that makes her manipulative, then I hope she manipulates them right into prison. The press conference ran for 90 minutes. By the end, the narrative had shifted. It wasn't about whether Ethan and Victoria could be trusted. It was about why the hospital was attacking grieving families instead of taking responsibility for its failures. Walking out of that community center, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite victory, it was too early for that, but maybe vindication, maybe hope. That was powerful, Victoria said quietly as they walked to her car. Marcus had already left, needing to get back to the hospital before anyone noticed he'd been gone. They were brave, Ethan said. Braver than I was 5 years ago. You were alone 5 years ago. They have each other, and they have you. They drove back to Manhattan in comfortable silence. When they reached Victoria's building, she didn't get out right away. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why did you really come back? When I was dying, you could have ignored the calls, stayed in Montana, let Marcus figure it out on his own. But you came. Why? Ethan thought about it. Lily said Sarah would have wanted me to help, and she was right, but that's not the only reason. What's the other reason? I think I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't broken, that what happened with Sarah didn't destroy my ability to do what I'm good at, saving people. He looked at Victoria. You gave me a chance to find out if I still could. And did you? Find out? Yeah, I did. Victoria smiled. Good, because I'm going to need you to keep doing it. She got out of the car and headed into her building. Ethan watched her go, then drove back to the hotel where Lily was waiting. The next week was a blur of depositions and legal filings and news coverage that swung wildly between supporting them and questioning everything. The hospital fought back hard, releasing their own documentation, questioning the family's credibility, suggesting that grief had clouded their judgment. But the tide had turned. Public opinion was firmly against Manhattan Crown, and more families started coming forward with their own stories. The Attorney General's investigation expanded. 2 hospital administrators were arrested on charges of evidence tampering. And through it all, Ethan kept meeting with families, listening to their stories, helping them understand what had really happened to their loved ones. It was exhausting and painful, and some days he wasn't sure he could keep doing it. But then he'd get home, and Lily would tell him about her day at school, or show him a drawing she'd made, or ask if they could get pizza for dinner. And he'd remember why it mattered, why all of this mattered. 3 weeks after the press conference, Victoria called him into her office with news. Manhattan Crown's board just voted to sell the hospital, she said. The criminal investigation has scared off investors. Their insurance premiums are skyrocketing. They're hemorrhaging money, so they're cutting their losses. Who's buying it? Victoria smiled. I am. Ethan stared at her. You're what? I'm buying Manhattan Crown Medical Center, the building, the equipment, the whole operation. And then I'm going to tear out everything that's broken and rebuild it the right way. That's going to cost more money than you can imagine. I know. I don't care. Victoria pulled up a document on her computer. I've been working on a proposal. A nonprofit hospital system focused on serving underserved communities. No more cutting corners to hit profit targets. No more covering up mistakes. Just medicine the way it's supposed to be practiced. That's ambitious. It's necessary. And I want you to help me design it. Figure out what protocols we need, what safeguards. How to build a culture where people like Marcus feel safe speaking up instead of staying quiet. Ethan sat down slowly. You're serious about this? Completely. I know it's a lot. I know you probably want to go back to Montana eventually. But before you do, help me build something Sarah would be proud of. He thought about that. About Sarah and what she'd wanted. About the kind of medicine she'd believed in. About the difference between running away and making a choice to do something different with your life. Okay, he said. But I have conditions. You always do. What are they? We do this right. No rushing, no cutting corners even when it's expensive or inconvenient. We take the time to build something that actually works. Agreed. And when it's done, when we've got the new system running and protocols in place, I want out. I want to go somewhere small and quiet and practice medicine without cameras and press conferences and federal investigations. Victoria nodded. I can live with that. Anything else? Yeah. You need to take care of yourself. Actually rest. See your doctors. Stop working 18-hour days. Because I'm not doing any of this if you're just going to work yourself to death before we finish. That's fair. Victoria closed her laptop. I'll try. No promises, but I'll try. Good enough. They shook hands on it, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest, a sense of purpose that had been missing for 5 years. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about building something better, making sure Sarah's death meant something, making sure Emma Patterson and all the others hadn't died for nothing. He went home that night and told Lily they were staying in New York for a while longer. How much longer? She asked. I don't know. Maybe a year, maybe more. Is that okay? Lily thought about it. Is it important, what you're doing? Yeah, I think it is. Then it's okay. I like Sophie anyway. She's nicer than Emma Johnson. Ethan laughed. Everyone's nicer than Emma Johnson. That night he finally replied to Dr. Chen's email. It took him an hour to write 3 sentences. Dr. Chen, I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if forgiveness is even what either of us needs. But I think I understand now that you were as much a victim of that hospital's failures as Sarah was. I hope you find peace in Alaska. Ethan Cole. He sent it before he could second-guess himself, then closed his laptop and went to bed. For the first time in 5 years, he slept through the night. The sale of Manhattan Crown Medical Center closed on a gray morning in November, 11 months after Victoria Sterling had collapsed on live television. Ethan stood in the empty lobby with her, watching movers carry out the last of the old administration's furniture. The water feature that had burbled against the wall for 15 years sat silent, drained, and dark. Strange, isn't it? Victoria said. This place almost killed me. Killed your wife, killed so many people. And now it's just a building. Buildings don't kill people, Ethan replied. The people running them do. Fair point. She walked to where the reception desk used to be, ran her hand along the empty space. I keep thinking about what we're going to call it. The new hospital. It needs a name that means something. Not the Sterling Medical Center? Too corporate. Too much about me. Victoria turned to face him. I was thinking the Sarah Cole Memorial Hospital, if you'd be okay with that. Ethan's throat went tight. He didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. Finally, she'd hate having a hospital named after her. I know, but the people it serves won't. And maybe that's what matters. They stood there in the empty lobby, 2 people who'd been broken by this place in different ways, now trying to build something better from the ruins. It felt impossible some days. Other days it felt like the only thing worth doing. The reconstruction took 8 months. Ethan worked with a team of architects and medical planners to redesign every floor, every room, every system. They ripped out the old ICU where Sarah had died and built something new. They upgraded equipment that should have been replaced years ago. They created protocols that prioritized patient safety over cost savings, even when accountants warned it would be expensive. Victoria funded all of it without blinking. When her board questioned the expenses, she reminded them that she owned the company and they could either support her or resign. 3 of them resigned. She replaced them with people who understood that some things mattered more than quarterly earnings. Marcus Hale stayed on as department head, but only after agreeing to a radical reorganization of the cardiac unit. More staff, better hours, mandatory rest periods, a reporting system where nurses and residents could flag concerns without fear of retaliation. He embraced all of it with the fervor of someone trying to atone for years of looking the other way. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself," he told Ethan one afternoon while they were reviewing staffing plans. "For Sarah, for all of it." "Then don't," Ethan said. "Just do better. That's all any of us can do." The criminal trials started that spring. 6 hospital administrators faced charges ranging from evidence tampering to negligent homicide. Ethan testified at 3 of them, walking juries through medical records and explaining in plain language how budget decisions had killed people. It was brutal. Defense lawyers tried to paint him as obsessed, vengeful, unreliable. But the documentation didn't lie, and neither did the families who testified alongside him. Richard Westbrook, the former CEO, got 12 years. 2 other executives got 8 and 6 respectively. The rest took plea deals in exchange for cooperation. It wasn't enough. Nothing could be enough. But it was something. It was accountability. David and Michelle Patterson sat in the gallery for every day of Westbrook's trial. When the verdict came down, Michelle cried so hard she couldn't stand. David held her while the courtroom emptied around them, and Ethan sat with them until they were ready to leave. "Does it feel like justice?" Michelle asked him later, outside on the courthouse steps. "I don't know," Ethan said honestly. "Does it to you?" "I don't know either. Emma's still gone. Nothing changes that." She wiped her eyes. "But maybe some other parent won't lose their kid the same way. Maybe that's enough." "Yeah, maybe it is." The new Sarah Cole Memorial Hospital opened on a humid day in July, 14 months after the acquisition. No fancy ribbon-cutting ceremony, no press conference, just a quiet opening with the staff gathering in the main atrium while Victoria spoke about what this place was meant to be. "This isn't a hospital for the wealthy," she said to the assembled doctors and nurses and orderlies. "It's not here to generate profit or build anyone's reputation. It exists for one reason, to provide excellent medical care to people who need it, regardless of whether they can pay. That's the mission. That's why we're here. And if anyone in this room has a problem with that, the door is right there." Nobody left. Ethan worked the first shift in the new emergency department. A steady stream of patients. Nothing dramatic, just people who needed help. A construction worker with a broken hand, a kid with strep throat, an elderly woman who couldn't afford her blood pressure medication and had been rationing pills for 3 months. Ethan wrote her a prescription and made sure the hospital pharmacy filled it for free. "How much do I owe?" she asked nervously. "Nothing," Ethan said. "That's not how we do things here." The woman stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Then she started crying. Ethan sat with her until she pulled herself together, helped her schedule a follow-up appointment, and watched her leave with the kind of relief on her face that no one should have to feel just for getting basic medical care. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Marcus said, appearing beside him. "Helping people without worrying about billing codes. Feels strange, like I'm getting away with something." "Maybe we are. Maybe that's the point." Marcus checked the patient board. "We've got a possible MI coming in. Ambulance is 5 minutes out. You want it?" "Yeah, I've got it." The myocardial infarction turned out to be severe anxiety, which Ethan treated and then referred to the hospital's new mental health unit, another innovation Victoria had insisted on. Psychiatric care in the same building as emergency medicine, fully integrated, no stigma attached. The kind of thing that seemed obvious, but almost no hospitals actually did. His shift ended at midnight. Ethan found Victoria in her office on the 7th floor, still working despite promising she'd go home hours ago. "You're supposed to be resting," he said from the doorway. I was resting. Then I remembered I had emails to send. She didn't look up from her laptop. "How was your first day?" "Exhausting. Perfect." Ethan sat down. "We had 43 patients through the ER. 3 of them couldn't pay. We treated them anyway." "Good. That's what we're here for." "Victoria, we can't survive if..." "We'll survive. I've got a whole team of accountants figuring out the sustainability model. Grants, partnerships, a sliding scale fee structure that actually works. We'll make it work." She finally looked up. "Stop worrying about money. That's my job. Your job is medicine." "I'm not used to not worrying about money." "I know, but try. Just for a little while." Lily had adjusted to New York better than Ethan had expected. She was 9 now, taller and more confident than the scared 7-year-old who'd made the drive from Montana 2 years ago. Her friendship with Sophie had deepened into something real, and she'd joined the school's art club where she spent hours painting things Ethan didn't always understand but always thought were beautiful. "Do you miss Montana?" he asked her one Saturday morning over breakfast. Lily considered it while spreading jam on her toast. "Sometimes. I miss the quiet and Mrs. Patterson's dog, but I like it here too. Sophie's teaching me how to skateboard. Please tell me you're wearing a helmet. Dad, I'm not stupid. I know, I just worry. You always worry." She took a bite of toast. "Are we staying here forever?" "I don't know. Maybe not forever, but for a while longer. Is that okay?" "Yeah, it's okay." She paused. "Do you think Mom would like what you're doing with the hospital?" Ethan thought about Sarah, about her passion for helping people who couldn't help themselves, about how she'd never back down from a fight if she thought she was right. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think she would." The hospital's first year was hard. They lost money every quarter despite Victoria's assurances that it was sustainable. Staff turnover was higher than they'd hoped as some doctors and nurses struggled to adapt to the new culture. Equipment broke. Systems failed. They had to troubleshoot protocols that looked good on paper but didn't work in practice. But they also saved lives. Hundreds of them. People who would have been turned away from other hospitals got care at Sarah Cole Memorial. The uninsured, the underinsured, immigrants who were afraid to seek help, homeless people who'd been ignored by the medical system for years. They all came through those doors, and they all got treated with dignity. Ethan kept meeting with families from the old cases. Some of them were healing. Others were still angry, still grieving, still trying to figure out how to live with their loss. He listened to all of them, bore witness to their pain. Sometimes that was all he could do. Sometimes it was enough. Michelle Patterson started volunteering at the hospital, working in the children's wing where she read stories to sick kids. David said it helped her feel close to Emma again. Ethan understood that. Everyone found their own way to carry their grief. Marcus published a paper about the new protocols they'd developed, and it got picked up by medical journals across the country. Other hospitals started calling, asking questions, wanting to implement similar systems. Marcus told them all the same thing. It required actually caring more about patients than profits. And if they weren't willing to do that, the protocols wouldn't help. Victoria's company took a hit. Sterling Biotech's stock dropped as investors worried about her focus on the nonprofit hospital. Two major shareholders tried to force her out. She bought them out instead, consolidating her control and making it clear she wasn't backing down. The stock eventually recovered. The investors who'd stayed made money. Everyone survived. One afternoon in the second year, Ethan was sitting in his office when Jennifer appeared with an envelope. "This came for you," she said. "Personal delivery." The courier said it was important. Ethan opened it. Inside was a letter handwritten on expensive stationery. "Dr. Cole, my name is Raymond Chen. You probably don't remember me, but I was the anesthesiologist who made the mistake that killed your wife. I've been in Alaska for 5 years now, trying to live with what I did. I saw the news about the new hospital, about everything you and Mrs. Sterling accomplished. I wanted you to know that I think about Sarah every day. That I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it, but I am. More than you'll ever know. I've been talking to a therapist here about whether I should try to go back to medicine, whether I can trust myself again. She says everyone deserves a second chance if they're willing to do the work. I don't know if I believe that, but I'm trying. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that what you built matters, that the work you're doing means something, and that Sarah would be proud. Respectfully, Raymond Chen Ethan read the letter 3 times. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a response. Dr. Chen, I got your letter. Thank you for writing it. I don't know if I forgive you. Forgiveness isn't something I've figured out yet, but I don't hate you anymore. I understand now that you were trying to do your job under impossible circumstances, that the real failure was the system, not you. If you want to go back to medicine, do it, but do it somewhere that won't work you 16 hours straight and expect you to stay sharp. Do it somewhere that values you as a human being, not just as a pair of hands. And if you can't find that place, build it yourself. That's what I'm learning, that sometimes the only way forward is to create something new. Good luck in Alaska. Ethan Cole. He sent it before he could second-guess himself, then sat back and stared at the ceiling for a while. Jennifer was still standing in the doorway. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I think I am. That evening, Ethan picked up Lily from school and they went to the small park near their apartment. They'd moved out of the hotel months ago into a modest place in a neighborhood that was safe but not fancy. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen where they could actually cook, windows that let in afternoon light. Lily played on the swings while Ethan sat on a bench and watched the city move around them. A year ago, he'd been terrified of this place. Now it felt like home. Not in the way Montana had been home, that comfortable, hiding from the world kind of home. This was different, messier, more complicated, but real. His phone rang. Victoria. We got the grant, she said without preamble. The Federal Healthcare Innovation Grant, $20 million over 5 years to develop and scale our model. Seriously? Seriously. They want us to pilot the program in 3 other cities, train staff, share protocols, basically prove that this actually works outside of our specific situation. Ethan processed that. That's huge. It's terrifying, but also huge. Yes, Victoria paused. I know we said you could leave after we got the hospital running, and it's running now, so if you want to go back to Montana, I understand, but I could really use your help with this expansion. Not forever, just another year or 2. Ethan watched Lily jump off the swing and run to the slide, laughing at something only she found funny. Let me talk to Lily, he said. See how she feels about staying longer. Of course. Take your time. They had dinner that night at a small Italian place Lily loved because they let her draw on the paper tablecloths with crayons. Over pasta, she told him about her day, about the boy in her class who ate glue, about the science project she was planning about volcanoes. Victoria called, Ethan said when she paused for breath. They got a big grant to expand the hospital model to other cities. She wants me to help with it, which would mean staying in New York longer. Lily twirled pasta on her fork. How much longer? Maybe 2 years? Maybe less? I don't know. And then we'd go back to Montana? Maybe. Or somewhere else. I don't know that either. Ethan leaned forward. What do you want to do? I don't know. I like it here. I have friends. But I also miss the mountains. She put down her fork. Can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy here? The question caught him off guard. Ethan thought about it. Really thought about it. Yeah, he said finally. I think I am. For the first time in a long time. Then we should stay. Because you were sad in Montana. You tried to hide it, but I could tell, and you're not sad anymore. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice. She grinned. So we're staying? If you're sure. I'm sure. They finished dinner and walked home through streets lit by storefronts and streetlights. Lily talked about maybe trying out for the school play. Ethan half listened, mostly just enjoying being with her, this small person who'd saved his life in ways she'd never understand. The hospital expansion happened faster than anyone expected. Within 6 months, they'd identified 3 cities, Detroit, Phoenix, and New Orleans, and started recruiting staff. Ethan traveled constantly, training doctors and nurses, helping set up systems, troubleshooting problems that inevitably arose when you tried to do things differently than everyone else. Victoria came with him sometimes. More often, she stayed in New York, managing Sterling Biotech while also overseeing the hospital network. She was better now about resting, about taking care of herself. She'd even started dating someone, a quiet professor of medical ethics who didn't care about money or status and who made her laugh. Ethan liked him. Marcus took over as chief medical officer of the entire network, a role that suited him better than department head ever had. He was good at systems thinking, at identifying patterns and fixing problems before they became crises. The guilt he carried about Sarah and the others would probably never fully go away, but he'd learned to channel it into something useful. You ever think about what we've built? He asked Ethan one afternoon while they were reviewing expansion plans. How unlikely all of this was. Every day, Ethan said. I mean, think about it. Victoria almost dies. You come back to save her. We expose the hospital. You two decide to rebuild it. And now we're creating a whole network of hospitals that actually put patients first. If someone had pitched this as a plan 2 years ago, I'd have said it was impossible. Maybe that's why it worked. Because we were too stupid to know it was impossible. Marcus laughed. Maybe. Or maybe sometimes the impossible things are the only ones worth trying. The third anniversary of Sarah's death fell on a Tuesday. Ethan took the day off and went alone to the cemetery in New Jersey where she was buried. He hadn't been there since the funeral, hadn't been able to face it. The gravestone was simple. Sarah Cole, beloved wife and mother. The dates. Nothing about how she died or why, just that she'd lived and been loved. Ethan sat on the grass beside the grave and told her everything. About Victoria, about the hospital, about Lily growing up in New York and learning to skateboard, about Marcus trying to be better, about the families they'd helped and the lives they'd saved. He told her about the nights he still couldn't sleep, still thought about what might have been different if he'd fought harder 5 years ago. "I don't know if what we're doing makes up for anything," he said to the stone. "I don't know if it's enough, but it's something, and I think you'd be okay with that." The wind moved through the cemetery, rustling leaves. Ethan stayed until the sun started to set, then drove back to the city. By the 4th year, the hospital network was operating at capacity. 4 hospitals across 4 cities, all using the same protocols, all committed to the same mission. They were still losing money, but the grants and donations were keeping them afloat. Victoria had convinced 3 other billionaires to contribute, selling them on the idea that healthcare didn't have to be a zero-sum game between profit and patient care. The original Sarah Cole Memorial Hospital in Manhattan had become a teaching facility. Medical students rotated through, learning medicine the way it was supposed to be practiced. Some of them went on to other hospitals and tried to implement what they'd learned. Some got shut down. Others succeeded. Slowly, incrementally, the culture started to change. Ethan cut back his hours in the 5th year, not because he wanted to stop working, but because Lily was starting high school and he wanted to be around more, to help with homework, to drive her to theater rehearsals, to just be present for the everyday moments he'd missed too much of when she was younger. "You're allowed to have a life outside of work," Victoria told him when he explained his decision. "I know that's rich coming from me, but it's true." "What about you?" Ethan asked. "When are you going to have a life outside of work?" "I'm working on it. Daniel proposed last week." "What?" "Victoria, that's congratulations. What did you say?" "I said yes, obviously." She smiled. "We're thinking small wedding, just family and close friends. You'll come, right? You and Lily?" "Of course, I'm happy for you." "Thanks. I'm happy for me too." She paused. "You know, 5 years ago I thought success meant building a bigger company, making more money, proving something to people who probably weren't even paying attention. And now I think success looks like this: building something that actually helps people, having someone to go home to at night, not dying alone in a hospital because I worked myself to death. That's oddly specific." "Well, it almost happened. Learned my lesson." She looked at Ethan. "What about you? What does success look like?" Ethan thought about it. Lily being happy, people getting care when they need it, going to sleep at night knowing I did something that mattered. He paused. "And maybe figuring out how to let go of some of this anger I've been carrying. I'm better than I was, but it's still there. Maybe it always will be. Maybe that's okay. Maybe." The anger did fade, though, slowly, like a scar that hurt less over time but never fully disappeared. Ethan found himself thinking about Sarah with more joy than pain, remembering the good parts instead of fixating on how it ended. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, not of the hospital, not of the system that had failed her, but it was something like acceptance, an understanding that he'd done everything he could to make meaning from her death. On a warm evening in June, 6 years after Victoria had collapsed on live television, Ethan and Lily stood on the roof of Sarah Cole Memorial Hospital, watching the sun set over Manhattan. The city spread below them in every direction, millions of lights beginning to flicker on as day faded to night. "Dad?" Lily said. She was 14 now, almost as tall as him, with Sarah's eyes and her own fierce independence. "Yeah? I've been thinking about what I want to study in college, when I eventually go." "Okay. What are you thinking?" "Medicine. I want to be a doctor, like you and Mom." Ethan's throat tightened. "That's a hard road, sweetheart. Long years, a lot of debt, and the system is still broken in a lot of ways, even with what we've tried to fix." "I know. But that's why I want to do it. Because it's still broken and someone needs to keep fixing it." She looked up at him. "You showed me that's possible. That one person can actually make a difference if they don't give up." "I didn't do it alone." "I know. But you could have given up after Mom died, after the hospital tried to destroy you. You could have stayed in Montana and just been sad forever. Instead, you came back and fought. And now look, she gestured at the building beneath them. This exists because you refuse to give up. This exists because a lot of people refuse to give up. Victoria, Marcus, the families, even Dr. Chen in his own way. It wasn't just me, but you started it. When you walked into that hospital room and told those doctors they were killing someone, you started all of this. Ethan pulled her into a hug. When did you get so wise? Probably around the time I had to grow up watching my dad save the world while trying to raise me. You set a high bar. He laughed. I'm not sure I saved the world. Maybe not the whole world, but you saved parts of it. That counts. They stood there as the sky turned from blue to purple to black. Below them, the hospital continued its work. Doctors seeing patients, nurses checking vitals, people getting care regardless of whether they could pay. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems, still inefficiencies, still people who fell through the cracks. But it was better. Measurably, documentably better. And sometimes better was enough. Victoria's wedding was small and perfect. Held in a garden in Connecticut on a day when the weather cooperated and everyone cried during the vows. Ethan stood with the small group of friends and family and watched Victoria marry someone who loved her for who she was, not what she'd built. At the reception, dancing under string lights while a band played, Victoria found Ethan sitting at a table. Not dancing? She asked. Not my thing, but congratulations. It was a beautiful ceremony. Thanks. She sat down beside him. I wanted to talk to you about something. Uh-oh, that's never good. It's not bad. Just, I think it's time. Time for what? For you to go. Build that small clinic you always talked about. The one where you can practice medicine without all the bureaucracy and politics and cameras. Victoria smiled. The hospital network is stable. Marcus can handle the operations. You've done what you came here to do. Are you firing me? I'm setting you free. There's a difference. She pulled an envelope from her purse. I took the liberty of looking at some options. Small towns that need doctors. Places where you could actually make a difference without having to fight a massive system. Ethan opened the envelope. Inside were printouts of several towns. Rural areas in Vermont, Oregon, Montana. Places that looked quiet and peaceful and nothing like Manhattan. One of them is about 50 miles from Black Ridge, Victoria said. If you wanted to go back to Montana, but somewhere new. Fresh start. You've put a lot of thought into this. I have. Because you deserve it, Ethan. You deserve to practice medicine the way Sarah would have wanted. The way you've always wanted. Without all the weight of what we've been carrying. Ethan looked at the papers. Thought about small towns and quiet clinics and days without press conferences or depositions or fighting hospital administrators. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course. Take your time. But not too much time. Life's short. You of all people know that. That night, Ethan showed the information to Lily. She looked through it carefully, studying each option. They all look nice, she said finally. Really different from here. Would you be okay with moving? You've got friends here. Your school. Theater. I've also got 2 more years of high school. I can make new friends. Join a new theater program. She set down the papers. But Dad, I don't want you to move because you think that's what I need. I want you to move because it's what you need. What I need is for you to be happy. And I'll be happy wherever we go, because I'll be with you. She smiled. So where do you want to go? Ethan looked at the options. Thought about Vermont with its mountains and seasons, about Oregon with its coast, about Montana and the life he'd left behind. I don't know yet, he said honestly, but I think I want to find out. They spent the summer visiting different towns, driving across the country in a better truck than the one they'd driven from Montana 6 years ago. They saw small communities that needed doctors desperately, met people who'd been driving hours to get basic medical care, found places where Ethan could make a real difference without fighting a broken system because in these places, he could build the system from scratch. They chose a town in Vermont. Population 3,000, 1 stoplight, a main street with a diner and a hardware store and a post office where everyone knew everyone else's business. There was a small clinic that had been closed for 2 years since the last doctor retired. The building needed work, but it had good bones. Victoria bought it for him, refused to let him pay her back. Consider it a thank you, she said when he protested, for saving my life, for helping me build something meaningful, for being the kind of person who actually gives a damn. I can't just accept, you can and you will. Now stop arguing and go practice medicine the way it's supposed to be practiced. They moved in October. Lily enrolled in the local high school and immediately got cast in the fall play. Ethan spent weeks renovating the clinic, painting walls, fixing the plumbing, setting up exam rooms. The town helped. Volunteers showed up with tools and supplies and an eagerness to have a doctor back in the community. The clinic opened on a cold November morning, no press, no ceremony, just a sign on the door that said Cole Family Medicine and a waiting room with 3 patients who'd been up since dawn to be first in line. Ethan treated a farmer with diabetes who hadn't seen a doctor in 4 years, a kid with a persistent cough that turned out to be asthma, an elderly woman who needed her medications adjusted. Basic medicine, important medicine, the kind of work that didn't make headlines but changed lives. That night he called Victoria. "How was day 1?" she asked. "Perfect. Exhausting and perfect." "I'm glad. You sound happy." "I think I am. How are things there?" "Busy. Good. We're opening 2 more hospitals next year. Marcus is handling most of it, but I'm staying involved. Can't quite let go entirely." "You never could." "No, but I'm learning." She paused. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything, for saving my life, for helping me see what actually matters, for being stubborn and principled and refusing to let the bastards win. Thank you for giving me a reason to fight, for helping me turn anger into something useful, for being stubborn enough to take on an entire industry because it was the right thing to do. We made a good team." "Yeah, we did." They talked for another hour, catching up, sharing news, promising to stay in touch. When Ethan finally hung up, he felt settled, content, like all the pieces of his life had finally found where they belonged. Lily appeared in the doorway. "Dad, there's an old guy on the porch. Says his back hurts, and can you look at it even though it's after hours?" Ethan smiled. "Tell him I'll be right there." "You don't have to see people after hours, you know. You're allowed to have boundaries." "I know, but Mrs. Patterson's dog in Montana taught me something." "What's that?" "That sometimes the best part of being a doctor isn't the big dramatic saves. It's the small moments, the everyday kindnesses, showing up when people need you, even when it's inconvenient." He stood. "Tell him to come in. Let's see what we can do." Lily grinned. "You're such a softie." "I learned from the best." Years passed. The clinic thrived. Ethan treated generations of families, delivered babies, helped people die with dignity when there was nothing else to be done. He taught Lily about medicine during her summer breaks from college, and she soaked it up with the same passion Sarah had once shown. The hospital network Victoria had built expanded to 12 cities. Marcus retired eventually, training his replacement and then moving to Florida, where he spent his days fishing and calling Ethan to complain about being bored. The families they'd helped, the Pattersons and the others, moved forward with their lives, carrying their grief but no longer crushed by it. Dr. Chen eventually did return to medicine. He worked at a rural clinic in Alaska treating fishermen and their families, and he never worked more than 8 hours in a day. He sent Ethan a Christmas card every year. Ethan started sending them back. On the 10th anniversary of Sarah's death, Ethan and Lily drove to New Jersey to visit her grave. Lily was in medical school by then, top of her class, already showing signs of being a better doctor than Ethan had ever been. They sat by the headstone together and Ethan told Sarah about everything, about the clinic, about Lily getting into medical school, about Victoria's hospital network still growing, still helping people, about how he'd finally figured out that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. "I miss you," he said to the stone. "Every day. But I think I'm okay now. I think we're okay." Lily put her hand over his. "Mom would be proud of us." "Yeah, I think she would." They sat there until the sun set, then drove back to Vermont where patients were waiting and life continued and the work of healing both others and themselves went on. Because that's what mattered in the end, not the revenge or the victories or the moments of dramatic justice, but the quiet persistence of showing up every day and trying to do better than yesterday. The small acts of kindness that didn't make headlines but kept the world turning. Ethan had learned that the hard way, through grief and anger and years of fighting. But he'd learned it, and now in a small clinic in a small town where everyone knew his name and nobody cared that he'd once taken on a hospital empire and won. He got to live it. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything.